Hello and welcome to the African Descendants Forum. I'm your host, Dr. Milton Brown, and today we have the privilege of being joined by the extraordinary Sandra Joseph. Sandra has empowered herself and others through a variety of roles over the years. She is a belief management master coach, motivational speaker, lecturer, assessor, and a published author. Her contributions have earned her numerous awards and nominations, including the Bex Live Awards Winner for Health and Wellbeing Promoter in 2016, the MBCC Awards Winner for Mentor of the Year in 2019, and a finalist spot in the BLAC Awards for Best Community Neighbour in 2020. Beyond her professional accolades, Sandra has a compelling and insightful family history. Her father, Augustine Joseph, is a veteran who served in World War II, and Sandra has meticulously researched and documented his military history. Today, Sandra joins us to discuss both her own inspirational journey and the incredible journey of her father. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Thank you. You travelled all the way from Birmingham. How was the journey?
Well, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
Straightforward, and the trains was on time.
Oh, brilliant.
That's good.
Brilliant. So let's get straight into it. Can you start by telling us a bit more about your amazing journey and the work you do? What has been the driving force behind all your efforts and passion you pour into your work?
Well, I'm a mother of two, and single-handedly raised my sons. And I come from a large family. I noticed that you have mentioned about my father. We are a family of 9. And that includes my mother and father. So there's 7 of us, and I'm the 5th one down. And what motivates me really is I love the family close-knit unit. And I love the idea of people, just being around people, helping people, inspire, and, literally do the best that they can do. And if they are stuck and they need a little helping hand, because we all need a little helping hand every now and then. Sometimes we just need someone to motivate us, especially when we're procrastinating on whatever. And, someone just gives us that little nudge, that little push. I like to be that person to be pushing people, to help, to inspire. So those sort of things in my makeup is a natural thing for me to go into coaching and to be doing a job where I always have people around me and always motivating. Currently, I'm working for a SEND college, SEND for Special Education Needs and Disabilities. I have students who are partially deaf, and that's one thing that a lot of people don't know about me, is that I'm actually partially deaf. Right, I wear 2 hearing aids, and that came about from my childhood days. I always was off school I was always the sick one in the whole of my family out of the 7 children. If something was going around, a bug or whatever, guaranteed this one's going to catch it. Right? Yeah, always a sickly child, and a lot of earaches and stuff, and that affected my hearing with nerve damage. Okay. So I've been wearing hearing aids for the longest time that I can remember. In the beginning, prior to my hearing aids, I didn't speak very clearly, right? Hopefully I'm speaking very well now, right? And you can understand me. But I had to kind of learn to speak clearly because my speech was a bit slurred. As you would probably imagine, someone who is either deaf or partially hearing. And I learned speaking and pronouncing words a lot by watching World of Sports. Back in the day, there used to be Dickie Davis doing a program called World of Sports. Yeah. And when they used to have the football results, it used to be, say Huddersfield versus Aston Villa, late kickoff. And I used to be reading as the man's reading as well. So all these different place names and football teams and stuff, I'll be reading it to get the pronunciations. Yeah. It's strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
And now, as a child, sitting down there watching that and saying that.
Yeah.
Do I sound boring?
No. But look.
But it was just my way of reading on the screen.
Yeah, but what
you know,
you've
and
done,
it helps
what
my
you've done with
speech.
that, it's extraordinary. All these accolades you've done, it's extraordinary.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
and we did meet probably about 4 weeks ago in Birmingham.
We did.
I would never have thought that you were partially deaf,
Yeah.
and I would never have thought, because your presentation inspired me to get in contact with you afterwards, because
Awesome.
it was wonderful the way you put it across
Thank you.
about your dad, Augustine,
Thank
and,
you.
and everything else. So I think it's an extraordinary story there, and we should be writing a book about that.
I thought about it.
Yeah.
I thought about it. You never know. That could be one of my books
Well,
in
hopefully,
future.
hopefully you might, and we'll get an exclusive. How's that? Yeah. So when did you first discover your passion for the line of work, and when did you realize you wanted to make this your career?
Yeah, well, as I said, because of my own, you could say, slight disability, I was very intrigued about helping children, and so I went to my first passion was actually performing arts, because as I started learning to speak better, I started wanting to portray my voice, right? And the best way to do that was I was going into every single school play that there was at senior school and getting a leading role, right, which was even good. So I did all of that, and I really enjoyed that. So I started going into performing arts and stuff. I joined the Birmingham Repertory Youth Theatre, and I met quite a few I would say actors and actresses of the day. I actually met Ronnie Corbett. Ronnie Corbett in the green room, and people were teasing, saying, "Oh, I wonder which one's taller," because I'm not very tall, you know. Yeah. So me and Ronnie Corbett actually stood back to back to see who was actually taller. And yes, he was taller than me. He was taller than me. Like,
you got a picture.
However, I was still growing. Okay. I was only 14 at the time, so you know, come on, give me some leeway. Yeah. But that was my first passion was acting, and then secondly was I went to college and done the beauty course and hairdressing and that sort of thing, the holistic therapies, and it was my teacher that says to me, "Have you ever thought about teaching?" And I was like, because I hadn't really had that confidence as much to teach. I didn't mind performing, but to teach somebody, that's a different level, you know. And I thought that I would have students that would laugh after me and that, you know, because of my hearing and, you know, that embarrassment. But a year later, I decided that, yes, I would go and do my qualifications for my teaching and that, because I thought to myself, and she inspired me actually, because it was someone believed in me. Why on earth aren't I believing in myself? So that basically was it. And then 29 years later, I'm still teaching.
Yeah. Well, I just think your career is extraordinary, and I didn't know half the things you're telling me now. Yeah. And I just think your achievement. So did somebody put you forward for those awards?
Yeah. People, I eventually had two businesses, but I actually closed down those businesses in 2020. Right, I'll tell you the reason why in a minute. Right, but the two businesses, one was Teen Girls Networking, where it says in the title, we used to do workshops and things for teen girls, helping them build confidence, self-love, crafts, you know, making them their own jewelry. Crocheting, going back to doing things that we normally used to do, and money management, history, and some of my father's history as well I brought into that. But yeah, we used to do that as a Saturday school kind of thing. And the other business was Club Lady Day Queens, right, where it was kind of like the big sister thing to that. But the main thing in Club Lady Day Queens was to help women to start their own business. So looking at their skills, looking at their passions, looking at the things that they love doing, and seeing what angle can we use to try and turn that passion into a business. You know, so that was the two businesses I had. The reason for closing down the business, right, is quite sad really, because my my youngest son, who's 32 now, contracted, he got the big C cancer, disease in 2020. And I was only able to go with him to the hospital on the first visit. By the second visit, it was the lockdown. So there was nothing like that. He went into remission last year.
Excellent.
And was free from cancer for a year, but it's recently come back in, I think it was March this year. So it's now, the UK has actually run out of options. There's nothing else they can do in the whole of this country here. Nothing else can do. So we're now doing campaigns and we got a GoFundMe and stuff like that to try and raise money to send him to America to get treatment. So that is the reason why I had to close down the two businesses, because at first I had to be looking after him at home and stuff. So, cutting a long story, but it's so much to talk.
Yeah,
we won't get it all into this, you know what I mean? But it's a 4-year battle, put it that way. Yeah.
Well, I wish you and your son all the very best, and whatever we can do to promote your GoFundMe page, please, we'll have a talk after the show.
Yeah, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
Thank you.
Moving on swiftly then, your father, Augustine Joseph, has an incredible story. What inspired you to delve into researching his history and military career?
Right, first of all, it's that picture on the wall. There's a picture on my wall of my father in his military uniform, which I always knew, but I never knew of any kind of a day in the life of what happened, right? Because there's lots of people who have family members who's been in the military and they know from a picture, but they don't know a day in the life, do they? A lot of them don't know a day in the life unless they've been told. Now, when my father passed away, he had a lot of information in what we call a grip, in his briefcase, right?
Our suitcase, we call it.
Exactly, right? It's like opening Pandora's box, that was. So we looked in his suitcase, we seen all these little papers, war permits and, discharge papers and everything. And then we came across this old newspaper, crumbled up, and, could hardly read it. And that was one heck of a story, one heck of a story. So that was the reason why I wanted to delve deeper into following from that story and the background and everything else. And so I've compiled that into a PowerPoint presentation, as you will hear a bit later on.
Well, I can't wait to hear this presentation. I heard it in Birmingham 4 weeks ago, and I can't wait to share it with everyone of our listeners on the African Descent Forum and Kirklees Local TV. Take it away, Sandra.
When Britain called for help from the Commonwealth countries during World War II, more than 10,000 men and women crossed the Atlantic from the Caribbean in response. Britain called, and they came. The West Indies provided fundamental support for the war effort. However, few made it to the front line, and many, in my opinion, didn't get the recognition they deserved. Bearing in mind, the Second World War happened at a time over about a decade prior to the Civil Rights Movement, which began in 1954, over the states where segregation, racial discrimination, and disenfranchisement was in fact legal. And Britain itself had its own hostility against people of colour. With that in mind, it is no wonder Hollywood, the world's film capital, did not portray black actors as much, and certainly did not make any feature films of black heroism during the war. Many of those films came decades and decades later, such as A Soldier's Story, 1984, starring Denzel Washington, Tuskegee Airmen, starring Lawrence Fishburne. That was in 1995. And Cuba Gooding Jr. starred in 2000 in a film called Men of Honor. So I guess we got there eventually. World War II also saw the Battle of the Caribbean, a period of which when the German U-boats roamed the Atlantic and specifically the Caribbean, sinking Allied ships with impunity. It was reported that over 300 ships were sunk in the Caribbean alone, and the loss of thousands and thousands of lives as the Germans attempted to starve Britain of oil and bauxite from the refineries of Trinidad, Aruba, and Curacao. To me, it is a very important segment of the war. That's just my opinion, maybe yours too. It seems to have been overlooked, the Battle of the Caribbean, or maybe deliberately excluded from the mainstream media, film and television, I don't know. I myself only discovered about the Battle of the Caribbean last year whilst liaising with a St. Lucian man called Nick Duval. He himself had his father serve in the Second World War as an RAF veteran. So with that liaison, I started doing my research about my father. Considering the fact it wasn't for these men and women working in the Caribbean, in these refineries and transporting the needed supplies for Britain, it would have been a totally different thing when it comes to Britain winning the war. As a matter of fact, in 1941 to 42, Britain was losing more ships to the U-boats, sinking them faster than they could build the ships to replace. So Britain would eventually have brought to a starvation without the US Liberty ships coming to the rescue. Today, I am here to share the story of one man that I admire. I call my personal hero. His name was Augustine Joseph, my father. This is a photograph of my father, and this is the one of his war passes. He was interviewed by a newspaper reporter for the Trinidad Guardian, where he tells of an account during his service while serving on board the SS Lucretia, which was a Dutch steam tanker en route from the ABC Islands, Curacao or Aruba, and it was bound for Avonmouth, in a port in Bristol in the UK. This was what the reporter had told into the newspaper. This is the SS Lucretia, and this is the report. Now, I'd read that story for you, right? And as you can see from the newspaper, this is what we found in my father's, what we call a grip, in his suitcase. This article is very crumpled up, as you can see. And the article reads, the green highlights at the top. First of all, we have this bit here in the corner. And that is saying, I was torpedoed on the George Washington as an ABC man, then was again torpedoed on the Jamaican Express as a sailor, and was for the third time torpedoed on board of this ship, Lucretia, as a second cook. So straight away, that little bit of information there alone tells of 3 torpedoes, and you could imagine the anxiety that my father must have faced every time he had to go on board a ship. So the story continues. Just at the top here, in the green, it tells you of the date the ship was sank. And it says, it was the 7th of July, 1940. And at the bottom, it then reads from here, explaining that he had suffered loss of clothes by the explosion, Joseph told how about 4 o'clock in the morning he was rudely awakened by the shock and thrown off his bunk. The attack, he said, was made without warning, and the tanker was cut through the center, but did not sink because the buoyancy of 3 of the 4 oil containers kept the boat afloat. The 4th had exploded, and it was with this that had caused the death of the captain. Immediately on being attacked, the crew jumped overboard and were in the water for 2.5 hours before they were rescued by lifeboats. He says that he escaped complete injury really because he followed with unruffled mind the other members of the crew by jumping off the port side, while others in their excitement rushed pell-mell to the starboard side, thus plunging into the flaming oil. 3 of the crew who took this means of escape are still in hospital, suffering severely from burns, while a 4th person sustained a broken arm. And just in the bottom here, you will see it says the Trinidad Guardian in the green highlighted. The Trinidad Guardian, Wednesday, September the 4th, 1940. So as you can see from that account, my father basically survived 2.5 hours in freezing cold water, and he made it back to, this is the sinking of the Lucretia. A photograph was taken from midair. And this is exactly where the ship went down. So you can imagine it's very close. They nearly made it. They nearly made it to the UK, but unfortunately, those German U-boats got them in the end. Yeah, so you can imagine how cold the water was there, because that's definitely not the Caribbean Sea, is it? So we know it's freezing cold. So anyway, they escaped and they survived. So considering the war was only 10 months into the start of the war, which was 1939, September, I can't imagine how anxious it must have been boarding a ship every time, not knowing if you're going to see dry land and not, just reach there in one piece. The experience of being torpedoed 3 times must have been really something. But it takes some bravery, in my opinion, to get back onto another ship every time and just keep continuing doing the job. Nonetheless, he survived the 6-year war and was not put off by his experience, because he actually continued life at sea, serving with the United States Coast Guard and other ships, and sailing around the world as a merchant seaman until roughly around about 1949 to 1950. I'm not entirely sure what year my father decided to settle here in England, but my brother was born in 1957, so I'm guessing between 1950 and 1955 circa. He met this wonderful woman, my mother, and obviously they had a relationship. My brother was born in 1957, as I said earlier. And then my brother was telling me, when he was young, around about 3 years old, he was living from room to room, because in those days, people only had a room to live in, right? The whole family had to live in one room. So as a toddler, he was telling me that my mother was saying to him that, not to worry, you will get your own room soon. My mom was determined, and my father was determined. They knew that eventually they would get a house of their own. So running around, they started off in Moseley in Birmingham, and then they moved to Handsworth in Birmingham, still a 1-room dwelling. By that time, my eldest sister was born, and the 1-room dwelling was getting overcrowded for a family of 4. My mother and father got married in 1959. And as you know, the one-room dwellings in those days was for the entire family. And it was just a normal thing. They hunted around all over Birmingham, still seeing those signs: no dogs, no Irish, no blacks, right? But eventually, because my father was a merchant seaman, and he was also into mixing a lot with the neighborhood, right? So he never only just mixed with black families, he mixed with Asian families, he mixed with African families, he mixed with Caucasian families, Irish families, whatever. And he was very much a very community person. My father and my mother eventually got this house here. So no more one room. We had loads of room here, as you can see. It's quite a large house. And mother was right. She did say that to my brother. So now he's got his own room. He got this house basically from an Englishman who he knew from him serving and being into an organization where only men would meet together. Right, they used to call them Freemasons, and I'm sure people know what Freemasons are. I have no idea what they did in Freemasons because I'm a woman, so I wouldn't know. But anyway, yeah, this Englishman he met, and the Englishman, this was his house, and he was actually leaving the area, so he promised my father that he would sell that house to my father at a discounted rate, and he did that. He was a man of his word. This house gave my father the opportunity then to help out other brothers and sisters who was coming over from the Caribbean or Africa or wherever. And he also started renting out rooms to give people a start up in life. My siblings, at one point, we had my two aunties and their husbands and my uncle. So you can imagine, even my parents now have their own space, the house was still overcrowded because we then now had other families into the house. The garden space, however, was a bonus because they had room for the kids to play, and I had very fond memories of playing and growing up in that house. My aunties stayed there for many years, and then after they managed to find the deposits for their own houses, they eventually moved out. My uncle stayed there until we as a family moved to another dwelling. My father also had a little poultry farm as well, where he used to raise chickens and turkeys. And Christmas time would obviously be the busiest time, where I found my father running around the garden, trying to chase the turkeys and doing what they do to kill the turkeys, which was not very pleasant, right? I remember seeing it one time, and never again did I go outside when I knew that my father was harvesting them turkeys for people to buy at Christmas. The house had a lot of fun. We also had what we called parties. Caribbeans used to call them blues, down in the cellar. And the kids then used to always come along with the parents, and they were watching Tom and Jerry cartoons on the projector. And we'd be sat down on a pool-sized table, sitting down there as kids, crowded on the pool-sized table and watching Tom and Jerry cartoons on the projector. Dad and Mom were well loved in the community, and they loved socializing as I do now myself. St. Peter's Road, Handsworth, was well known for the Caribbean community for social entertainment, where one could hear the sounds of reggae, ska, rock and roll, and reminisce of the times back home. It's memories like these that I give thanks to my parents for, and organisations like the Forgotten Generations, who tirelessly support those forgotten stories by providing a platform such as what they have done for me when I made this first presentation. And I thank you for this organisation who's also given me this platform. So I will leave it there now, and I thank you for all the attention that you've given me. And this is basically the father-daughter story of Augustine Joseph, aka Anthony, as he used to call himself here in the UK. And me, myself, Sandra Joseph, thank you.
Thank you, Sandra, for sharing such an insightful presentation with us and the audience. Your father was a truly inspiring individual, and we are honored and grateful to you for sharing his remarkable story with us today. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. I'm Dr. Milton Brown, and I'll see you next time on the African Descendants Forum. Thank you.